Hey gang, Ed Nelson here, and welcome to Backlash Lessons. Today we're going to talk about baitcaster basics. Alright? For those of you who are looking for some tips, maybe you have a baitcaster and having trouble throwing it, this is the video for you. But for my newbies out there, this video is a must. Now, to get started with the baitcaster, the last thing you want to do is take it out and try and throw it. Or you're going to get a real quick lesson in Backlash. The way to learn how to throw a baitcaster properly, first of all, is to understand how a baitcaster works. What do all these knobs do, and how do they help you control your cast? Now, when I teach these classes, I always teach with a Bass Pro Shops Johnny Morris signature reel. Why Johnny Morris signature? Two reasons. First of all, superior quality. If this is a top-of-the-line reel for any kind of fishing. Now, the second reason is the brake systems. Most baitcasters have one or two or three ways of controlling your cast. The Johnny Morris signature has all three. Alright? So by learning this reel, you can apply it to any reel you buy. Now, let's get started. First of all, let's talk about backlash. Before we get into the reel, let's talk about backlash. What is backlash? Well, everybody seems to think it's this big knot that's created when you cast. And it really isn't. What backlash, or how backlash is formed, is in three different stages. You have front end backlash, middle backlash, and rear end backlash. And there's a brake system that's used to control each section of the backlash. Again, that's why I use the Johnny Morris signature. It has a brake system for each one of those sections. Now, front end backlash. What is front end backlash? It occurs when you make your initial cast. When you release the spool, rear back, and snap that bait forward. That's when the initial backlash occurs. It's the initial surge of the spool. A lot of baits we throw, for example, large crankbaits, buzz baits, horrible for it. Spinner baits, especially on windy days, or when they roll end over end instead of flying through the air, they create a lot of wind drag. Alright? The best one would be the buzz bait as an example. When you rear back and snap a buzz bait forward, let's say it's a half-ounce buzz bait. Alright? The difference between a half-ounce buzz bait and a half-ounce jig to your rod is nothing. They're the exact same bait. So you rear back, it loads a half-ounce of lead, you flex a half-ounce of lead, and then you snap out a half-ounce of lead. But with a buzz bait, unlike a jig, that buzz bait immediately starts, the blade on starts to immediately catch air. So it's slowing down. So when you snap it out, the reel explodes or takes off like it's throwing a half-ounce of lead, and then wind resistance takes over on the bait and slows it down very quickly. So there's an initial surge of the cast where the line's coming off quickly, but the bait is not moving quickly. That walk off of the line on the reel, that's front end backlash. Alright? And there's a pin brake system to control that. Alright? Now, as the bait flies through the air, it starts to slow down. As the bait starts to slow down, centrifugal force on the reel also slows down. There is a point at which the centrifugal force on the spool becomes less than the spring tension holding the pins out. When that happens, the pins pull in, and now the reel is what we call free spool. Alright? The only brake system holding it now is your cast control. And that's when your cast control and your thumb are in charge. Alright? Now let's go on with the cast. Let me stop here a second. If the cast control is not set properly, or your thumb is not trained properly, the line again, when those pins pull in, will start to walk off. If that happens, that's called middle backlash. Alright? And again, your cast control helps control that. Now, the bait continues on through the air. It's slowing down, slowing down, slowing down, slowing down. Now, when we make a cast, we want a nice, smooth presentation into the water. You don't want your cast going straight out and falling. You want it to go out and feather down towards the water. Alright? How do we do that? With the magnetic brake. Alright? The magnetic brake helps the cast feather down to the water. Also, it makes sure that when the bait does hit the water, the spool stops spinning. If the bait hits the water and the spool is still spinning, that's called rear end backlash. Alright? And as I said, that's controlled by the magnetic brake. Now, how do we put it all together? Alright? Let's start with the front end of the cast. When I release my thumb bar, I have to catch the spool with my thumb. All right? I rear back and I snap that bait out, and that spool takes off like a rocket. All right? What happens is, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's 6 pins in here. And they're controlled by just a click of your finger. If you click them up, they're activated. If you click them back in, they're deactivated. When I make that cast and I snap my wrist and send that bait out there, any pin that's activated, centrifugal force pushes it against spring pressure, because they're all spring loaded, pushes it against spring pressure, and they fly outward. When they do, they rub on this brass drum, all right, and they deaden that initial surge of the cast. All right. Now, as the bait's flying through the air, like we said, the bait starts to slow down, and the reel starts to lose centrifugal force. As that centrifugal force dies, the spring tension on these pins becomes greater than the centrifugal force holding it out, and the pins pull in. When they do, you're now in free spool. You're still moving too quickly for the magnets to hold the spool, but not fast enough for the pins to hold the spool. That's when your cast control is in charge. Your cast control and your thumb. Your thumb is in charge of the entire length of the cast, but this is the most important point, because this is when it's doing most of its work. All right? And again, the cast control, all it does is it just applies pressure to the axle of the spool to help maintain that middle section, that free spool section. All right, that and your thumb. Now, again, we continue to slow down. As it gets towards the end of the cast, we want a nice feathering in, and when it hits the water, we want that spool to stop. All right, that's controlled by your magnetic brake. And how it works is, there's a bar of 5 magnets in here. All right, those 5 magnets are controlled by this control knob marked 0 to 10. We have a metal plate right here. Okay, as I move that knob from 0 towards 10, that bar of 5 magnets gets closer to that metal plate and applies magnetic force to it. What that does is it allows the magnets to stop that spool when that bait hits the water. And that's what we want. That gives us a nice smooth cast all the way through. Now, we know what backlash is. We know how to control it. Now we got to put it all together and cast. All right? And to do that, you need to go outside for that one. So let's take it outside, and let's set this thing up to do some casting.